The quest for liberation began with Siddhartha Gautama's own confrontation with the fragility of human existence. Born into privilege, shielded from sickness, aging, and death, he eventually faced the raw truths of life. These encounters planted a question that would define his path. Is there a way out of suffering? His search was not for wealth, power, or fleeting pleasures, but for an enduring freedom beyond the turbulence of human desire and loss. In this journey, Nirvana emerged as the ultimate answer, not as a distant heaven or reward, but as a direct experience of liberation. When the Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, he did not discover a divine intervention or mystical paradise. Instead, he realized a profound insight into the nature of reality. All things are impermanent, craving leads to suffering, and freedom lies in letting go. Nirvana was the end of his restless seeking, the cooling of the fire of dissatisfaction that burns within every being. From that moment, the Buddha devoted his life to teaching others that this state was not reserved for him alone, but accessible to all who sincerely walk the path. Thus, the meaning of nirvana begins in the Buddha's story, not as an abstract doctrine, but as the lived experience of liberation. It is the ultimate destination of a spiritual journey that starts with the simple recognition that suffering exists and that a way beyond it is possible. In this light, nirvana is not just a concept to be studied, but a reality to be realized through practice, patience, and awakening. To understand nirvana, we must first recognize the cycle it liberates us from, samsara, the endless round of birth, death, and rebirth. In Buddhist thought, life is not seen as a single linear journey, but as a continuous wheel driven by karma, the moral law of cause and effect. Actions rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion perpetuate this cycle, binding beings to repeated existences marked by suffering. Samsara is not merely the external world we inhabit, but the inner prison of our attachments and illusions. Nirvana, then, is the great release from this cycle. It is described as the unbinding, the final breaking of the chains that tie us to samsara. When craving ceases, the momentum that fuels rebirth comes to an end. The Buddha often used the image of a flame going out, not as annihilation, but as the cessation of the fire that had been burning. Just as a lamp no longer flickers when its oil is spent, so too does the cycle of samsara end when ignorance and desire are exhausted. This freedom is not about escaping the world physically, but transcending its grip on the heart. Nirvana means no longer being compelled by the endless turning of the wheel, no longer being caught in patterns of clinging and aversion. For the awakened one, life continues in the present moment, but the chains of samsara no longer bind. What remains is profound peace, the stillness beyond all becoming. The Buddha often explained nirvana through the image of a fire going out, not because something is destroyed, but because something that once burned intensely has been extinguished. What is extinguished? The craving, greed, and ignorance that fuels suffering. These three are like flames consuming the heart, driving endless desire, dissatisfaction, and confusion. As long as craving persists, the cycle of suffering continues. When craving ceases, the fire cools, leaving behind the serene clarity of nirvana. Craving arises from the illusion that lasting happiness can be found in possessions, relationships, or even in our own identities. We chase pleasure, resist pain, and cling to the fragile sense of I and mine. But everything we grasp slips away, for all is impermanent. This restless thirst is the root of suffering. Nirvana is the complete extinguishing of this thirst. It is not about suppressing desire with force, but about seeing through it with wisdom, so deeply that it no longer binds. To experience nirvana is to realize that nothing external can provide ultimate satisfaction. It is the freedom of a heart no longer pulled by craving, no longer disturbed by aversion. What remains is not emptiness in a bleak sense, but fullness, an unshakable peace that arises when the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion have gone out. In this state, the mind rests in clarity, luminous and free. When we speak of nirvana, we step into territory that resists language itself. The Buddha often described it in negatives, not this, not that, because any attempt to define it risks reducing it to ordinary concepts. Words belong to the world of duality, hot and cold, joy and sorrow, life and death. But nirvana lies beyond such opposites. It is not an object to be grasped or a place to be reached, but a reality that transcends categories altogether. For this reason, nirvana is said to be ineffable, beyond words. Just as the taste of honey cannot be fully conveyed through description, nirvana can only be truly known through direct experience. The Buddha discouraged endless speculation about its nature, comparing it to a man struck by an arrow who refuses treatment until he learns who shot it, from where, and with what wood it was made. Instead, the Buddha urged seekers to remove the arrow of suffering through practice, and in that process, discover the reality of nirvana for themselves. This does not mean nirvana is vague or unreal. Rather, it is so radically different from conditioned experience that ordinary thought cannot contain it. What language can do is point, using metaphors of peace, freedom, and cooling, but the truth of nirvana lies in the silence beyond words. To approach it is to loosen the mind's grip on concepts and open to a wisdom that sees reality directly, without distortion. Those who speak of nirvana often describe it in terms of profound peace, a freedom that cannot be shaken by the storms of life. It is said to be the highest happiness, not because it grants fleeting pleasure, but because it transcends all conditions that give rise to suffering. In this state, the heart is free from fear, resentment, and restlessness. It rests in a calm so deep that no external circumstance can disturb it. The Buddha sometimes called nirvana the deathless, because it stands outside the cycle of birth and death. This does not mean eternal life in the usual sense, but rather liberation from the very forces that bind us to impermanence. To realize nirvana is to step into a freedom where nothing can be taken away, because it depends on nothing at all. It is an inner refuge, untouched by loss, pain, or change. Such freedom brings an unshakable joy. Not the excitement of pleasure, but the serenity of a mind fully at ease. Imagine a fire that once roared with heat now resting in cool stillness, or a stormy sea settling into calm waters. This is the joy of nirvana, a joy not based on having or becoming, but on being free. Those who taste even a glimpse of it speak of a lightness, a release, a clarity that no suffering can overshadow. One of the greatest misunderstandings about nirvana is the belief that it represents nothingness, a void where existence simply disappears. This misconception often arises because nirvana is described as the extinguishing of craving and the end of samsara. To the untrained mind, this may sound like annihilation. But the Buddha was clear: nirvana is not destruction, nor is it a bleak emptiness. It is the ultimate fulfillment, the realization of freedom beyond all limitations. To see this, we must understand that what ends in nirvana is not life itself, but the illusions that keep us trapped in suffering. Greed, hatred, and delusion fall away, not the essence of being. Just as a fever breaking brings relief and clarity, the extinguishing of craving brings peace and wholeness. In fact, Those who approach nirvana often describe it as the most complete state of being, a fullness that cannot be measured or diminished. The Buddha compared nirvana to reaching the far shore after crossing a turbulent river. The struggle of swimming is left behind, but what remains is not emptiness. It is solid ground, safety, and rest. This is why nirvana is sometimes called the unconditioned. Unlike the fragile happiness of worldly life, it does not depend on causes that eventually fade away. Instead, it is stable, timeless, and secure. Far from nothingness, nirvana is the end of dissatisfaction and the discovery of a freedom so profound that it cannot be lost. It is not the absence of life, but the presence of awakening. The path to nirvana is not a sudden leap, but a gradual unfolding guided by wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. Central to this journey is the Noble Eightfold Path, which the Buddha presented as a practical framework for freeing oneself from suffering. It begins with right understanding and right intention, fostering clarity about the nature of reality and a compassionate heart. Ethical conduct, including right speech, action, and livelihood, creates a foundation of trust and harmony, reducing harm to oneself and others. Mindfulness and meditation are the transformative pillars that allow insight into the workings of the mind. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration train the heart and mind to observe reality without attachment or aversion. As the practitioner cultivates awareness, the illusions of permanence and self begin to dissolve. Craving loses its grip, and the cycles of samsara gradually weaken. In this way, nirvana is not a distant prize, but a natural result of persistent, conscious living. The journey is not merely intellectual, it is deeply experiential. Each moment of ethical choice, every act of compassion, every period of stillness in meditation contributes to the extinguishing of inner fires. Progress may be subtle, glimpses of peace may appear and fade, but with perseverance, the mind becomes increasingly free. Nirvana is realized not as an abstract goal, but as the lived fruit of diligent practice, a state where suffering is no longer the driving force of existence. Although nirvana is often described as a distant goal, the Buddha taught that glimpses of it can be experienced here and now. Through mindfulness, compassion, and ethical living, one can touch the stillness at the heart of being, even amidst the ordinary rhythms of life. A mind attentive to the present moment notices craving arising and passing away, sees anger or fear without being swept away, and experiences freedom within each choice. These moments are small windows into the boundless peace of nirvana. Compassionate action is another doorway. When we extend kindness without expectation, when we act with empathy and patience, the mind softens and the grip of ego loosens. In these acts, we participate in the awakening of others while deepening our own connection to the unconditioned. Nirvana is not separate from daily life. Rather, it transforms how we engage with it. Ordinary tasks, conversations, and relationships become opportunities to practice liberation. Even the simplest awareness, breathing, walking, listening, can serve as a mirror of nirvana. In these moments, the incessant demands of craving and aversion fade, leaving a clarity and joy that do not depend on circumstance. The Buddha's teaching is a reminder that while full liberation may unfold over time, the essence of nirvana is never beyond reach. It is alive in each mindful breath, each compassionate gesture, each moment of letting go. In learning to live this way, one steps continuously into the peace that is both the path and the destination. As we draw this exploration of nirvana to a close, it is helpful to rest in the gentle truth that this state of liberation is not an abstract idea, but a living possibility available to every sincere practitioner. Nirvana represents the end of clinging, the cooling of the fires of desire, and the unveiling of a mind and heart fully at peace. It is a profound freedom that transcends the ordinary ebb and flow of emotions, circumstances, and worldly concerns, yet it is not inaccessible or separate from daily life. In fact, each mindful breath, each act of kindness, and each moment of awareness brings us closer to experiencing it here and now. Consider the river of life, turbulent, unpredictable, sometimes overwhelming. The Buddha's teachings offer a way to navigate this river with balance, wisdom, and calm. Nirvana is like reaching the far shore, not by avoiding the river, but by moving with it, learning its currents, and discovering the stillness beneath the surface. It is a sanctuary within, where the mind rests, the heart opens, and the self, in its clinging and resistance, gently dissolves. There is no sudden annihilation, only the unfolding of a clarity and joy that were always present, waiting to be realized. In practice, we may only touch fleeting glimpses at first, but even these moments are transformative. They remind us that suffering is not eternal, that freedom is possible, and that the essence of awakening is always within reach. Through patience, mindfulness, ethical living, and compassion, the path becomes both a journey and a destination. Nirvana is not a distant reward. It is the natural unfolding of a heart willing to let go, the quiet joy of liberation that whispers in every moment we open fully to life.